Emotional Regulation Workshop, recording number 4.
Hello everyone and welcome back to our fourth recording in our Emotional Regulation Workshop series. We hope that you are looking forward to another informative recording. Today we are going to learn about the different zones of regulation. We will then move on to some parenting strategies that can be used to help improve emotional regulation. We will attach some links to videos that you can watch over the course of the workshop, and we will also invite you to take some brainstorming moments where we would ask that you write down some thoughts or ideas to questions on a piece of paper.
The Zones of Regulation is a framework created by occupational therapist Leah Kuipers. It is a systematic, cognitive, behavioural approach used to teach self-regulation by categorising all the different ways we feel and states of alertness we experience into 4 concrete coloured zones. The zones can be useful in teaching children the vocabulary of emotions, about the perspectives of others, how their behaviour impacts on those around them, and give them insight into their triggers. The programme is designed to help children recognise when they are in different zones and learn how to use strategies to change or stay in the zone they are in. It is important to note that there is no good or bad zone or emotion. There are certain times when it is okay to be in the yellow or the red zone. The zones have been used in school curriculums and in therapeutic settings, but it is also appropriate for parents to teach at home too. It does generally take 10 to 12 weeks to cover the zones program, and so within this recording and the next recording, we will only be introducing you to some of the concepts and strategies that we think are most relevant and useful to you. To begin, the blue zone. When you are in the blue zone, your body is running slow. This zone is used to describe low states of alertness and down feelings, such as when one feels sad, tired, sick, or bored. The next zone that we will be discussing is the green zone. The green zone is like a green light. You are good to go. It is used to describe a calm state of alertness. You may be described as happy, focused, content, or ready to learn when in the green zone. This is the zone where optimal learning occurs. Next up is the yellow zone. The yellow zone is used to describe a heightened state of alertness and elevated emotions, such as appearing wound up. However, one has some control when they are in the yellow zone, but we should proceed with caution and slow down. Someone in this zone may be feeling stressed, frustration, anxiety, excitement, silliness, the wiggles, or nervousness. Lastly, the red zone is a zone reserved for extreme emotions. A person in this zone may be elated or experiencing anger, rage, explosive behavior, devastation, or terror. A child in this zone is out of control and will have trouble making good decisions. In this zone, we must stop.
Some key points to remember about the zones of regulation include: there are no bad zones. All of the zones are expected in different times and circumstances. You can be in more than one zone at one time, and zones can change across the day.
I'd like to take a moment now to ask you to check in with yourself and see what zone you are in. You may be in the blue zone if you have had a poor night's sleep. You may be in the yellow zone if you are thinking and worrying a lot about your child's difficulties. Or you may be in the green zone as you are feeling calm, focused, and ready to learn from this recording. You can support your child during this process in a number of different ways. During daily life, use the language and talk about the concepts of the zones as they apply to you in a variety of environments. Using the language normalizes it and brings it into their everyday vocabulary. Make comments aloud so the child or young adult understands that it is natural that we all experience the different zones and use strategies to control or regulate ourselves. For example, this is really frustrating me and making me go into the yellow zone. I need to use a tool to calm down. I will take some deep breaths. When initially introducing the zones, if you have watched the film Inside Out, you could start the conversation by discussing the characters and what zone they are in with your child. We can help children or young adults to gain awareness of his or her zones and feelings by pointing out your observations. For example, you seem sleepy and quiet at the moment. It seems like you might be in the blue zone. Ensure to use age-appropriate language. Share with them how his or her behavior is affecting the zone you are in and how you feel. For example, I see that you are feeling very angry and this makes me feel uncomfortable and move into the yellow zone. Help them to become comfortable using the language to communicate his or her feelings and needs by encouraging them to share his or her zone with you. You could do this by simply asking them what zone they are in. Another idea could be to introduce a zones check-in twice daily to your routine in the morning and evening. Don't worry if this all sounds a bit complicated. We have provided you with the link to a free webinar for parents on the zones. Feel free to come back to this link to get more information on the 4 zones. So here we have applied the zones to the anger cycle that we learned about in one of the previous recordings. Anxiety also follows this cycle. So it starts off in the green zone. Here we are alert and in control, or in terms of the hand model we have also learned about, our lid is down and there is good communication between the upstairs and the downstairs brain. Then, something happens to trigger us. This could be something we can see. For example, if you are a child, it could be another child taking a toy off of you without asking. It could be someone saying something mean to us. A trigger might also be a thought we have, such as, I'm going to fail, or nobody likes me. This then causes us to enter the yellow zone. We still have some control, but we might be starting to feel stressed, frustrated, or worried. In terms of the hand model of the brain, this is where the downstairs brain starts to feel like we might be under threat or in danger. Communication between the upstairs and downstairs brain starts to reduce. If we don't do something here to help regulate ourselves or our child, so if we don't use any strategies or tools, then our yellow feelings are going to intensify and escalate until we enter the red zone. In the red zone, we might be shouting or yelling. We might be feeling very angry or terrified. We might even be engaging in explosive behavior and hitting out. In terms of the hand model of the brain, in the red zone, our lid has flipped. Communication between our upstairs and downstairs brain has been cut off, and the downstairs brain has taken over, causing us to act in reactive and sometimes animalistic ways. In the red zone, safety should be our priority. Feelings in the red zone will eventually reduce in intensity on their own, without intervention, but being able to use a strategy or tool will be able to speed up this process. Once these red zone feelings decrease and we become calmer, our lid comes back down. We may then enter the blue zone. During the red zone, we may have used up a lot of energy. We might have said or done things that we now start to feel bad about or regret. This can cause us to feel tired, sad, or down. When in the blue zone, we may feel like we need some alone time to process what has happened or a rest, and this is perfectly normal.
I'd like to invite you to pause the recording and type the link in this slide into your browser. This will allow you to access the recording. If you need to pause the recording, simply press pause and then press the play button. If you need to pause the recording, then press pause again. which will bring you to a short video about the importance of recognizing when we are moving into the yellow zone and the potential consequences of not using a strategy at this time. Take a moment after watching this short video to think about what you have just watched and what you noticed.
As we saw in the video, Bobby is in the yellow zone when we first meet him. We can see signs of frustration with him, sighing, shaking his head, and scribbling over answers. The trigger was likely to be thoughts about not being able to finish the work he has been set. We see him move into the red zone when he begins to shout and rips up his worksheet. This outburst impacts on his classmates. His yelling and behaviour is unexpected and caused everyone around him to feel uncomfortable, distracted, and upset. If Bobby were to have these outbursts on a regular basis, this could potentially impact on his friendships and ability to get on with his classmates. Think about it. Would you want to be friends with someone who regularly made you feel uncomfortable, upset, distracted, or even scared? Probably not. We clearly see that prevention is better than cure. By giving himself a break, he stops himself from going into the red zone and having to deal with the fallout of his behaviour. For example, having to try to re-establish relationships with his peers and possibly his teacher, feeling embarrassed or sad about what has happened, having to write out the worksheet again, and so on. The point we would like to get across is, it doesn't matter whether you call it entering the yellow zone or if you call it being about to flip your lid. The main thing is that we learn to recognize when we are starting to feel dysregulated so we can use tools or strategies to calm down before it's too late. So before getting into specific emotion regulation strategies, we want to discuss with you some important things about these strategies which will help to prepare you to use them and give you the best chance of success. We are going to be discussing and learning about a wide variety of strategies, and with them, it's not a case of one size fits all. In life, we all have different tastes and preferences, and children are certainly no different. There are going to be some strategies which your child will like and find helpful, and there is a good chance that there will be some that they really don't like. As parents, you know your child best, and so you will probably have a fair idea which ones they might like. Finding out which strategies work for your child is going to take a bit of trial and error, as well as an open mind. But we are very hopeful that you will take away some useful ideas today to try. As we may have mentioned in the last session, all different types of strategies might be more appropriate and effective in some zones compared to others, and this may vary for different children. Again, this is something that will have to be figured out on an individual level. Don't worry too much about this now though, as we will be discussing later in the recording how to tailor an individual toolkit for your child. Helping your child to develop emotion regulation skills is going to take a lot of practice, persistence, and patience. Consistency is key. Like learning to ride a bike, it's not something that children will get on their first go. As parents, you will be like the stabilizers, helping your child along the way until they are ready to go it alone. Even though there might be some bumps and falls along the road, it is very important to practice these strategies when your child is calm and to practice them regularly. Otherwise, in times of intense emotions, your child may not remember to use the strategy or how to do it properly, which could result in further frustration and stress. Learning to recognize our emotions is the first step in learning how to regulate them. A lot of what we have covered so far in the recording today and in the last recording have been around emotional education and providing a starting point. You know, a framework or language for you to communicate with your child about emotions. This isn't something that children learn overnight, and we need to keep working on it. Some other ways you can teach your child about emotions include name it to tame it. Children often can't tell what they or others are thinking. We need to teach children to recognize feelings in themselves and others. Labeling is one way of doing this. For example, if a child is angry, say, I wonder if you are angry. You have your arms crossed and you're stomping your feet. Encourage empathy. For example, encourage them to try and imagine what this person feels when this happens. Highlight that other children or teenagers and adults may have similar feelings in the same situation. You can use TV, books, internet, and everyday life as examples. Also teach your children about expected versus unexpected behavior. Tell children what is expected of their behavior in a certain situation. Talk to children about how they feel when other people act unexpectedly. Do they feel confused, annoyed, or frustrated? See if they can relate this to when others feel they are acting unusually. For example, what do you think mommy feels when you do this? This is something not every child will be able to achieve. However, it can be useful in helping children who feel that they get in trouble a lot. There are other parenting strategies which can be used as well as emotional education. We are going to look at some of these now. So, the first of these strategies is something called modeling. Modeling means teaching by example, and in the case of children, teaching them how we want them to act by acting that way ourselves. Emotional development is dependent on watching, imitating, and learning from others. So, as we've mentioned before, it's important for us to try and keep our cool. Also, remember from recording 1 the video of Riley and her dad arguing. Our own level of regulation can impact on our ability to help regulate others, so it is doubly important. However, keeping our own emotions regulated is sometimes easier said than done. I'm sure we all have had times when we have lost our cool. Don't worry if you don't model handling your emotions well in front of your child on the odd occasion. None of us are perfect and we can come back from it. We just need to try to repair the mistake. For example, imagine you were driving with your family in the car. Suddenly, another car swerves in front of you, nearly hitting you and causing you to brake sharply. You notice that the other driver is on the phone, and without thinking, you start swearing at them and laying on the horn. Would this be a good way of modeling to your child how to manage anger? No. In this situation, the best thing to do would be explain to the child why you lost your cool and to apologize. For example, you might say, Daddy got a fright when the other car swerved in front of us and the driver was on their phone as it was dangerous and we could have crashed. This made me feel mad at the driver and so I shouted and beeped the horn at him. But this wasn't the best way of dealing with my feelings. I should have taken some deep breaths. The shouting and beeping might have been scary or embarrassing for you. I'm sorry. How do you feel? It's important to note that if a child repeatedly witnesses those around them losing their cool, either at them or someone else without repair, this can be damaging. I'd like to invite you to pause the recording now and click on the link to the video, which will give you more information on modeling emotions.
So after watching the video in the last slide, I'd like you to take a few moments to think about how you model emotions for your own child in your daily lives. And how do you keep your emotions regulated in particularly stressful situations?
Modeling plays a huge role in our children's development. They tend to readily imitate what they see. For example, social learning research has shown that children who witness higher levels of aggression act more aggressively. Those who witness higher levels of anxiety behave more anxiously. That being said, We do know that children can have difficulties with regulation for a whole variety of reasons, so we are also very aware that a child who exhibits anxiety or aggression may have parents who are very regulated. Rules, boundaries, and consequences are next up on parenting strategies that are so important. Children often rely on structure, rules, and boundaries. The world can be a confusing place, and children often don't understand it in the same way as adults do. Rules let them know what is acceptable. Consequences can also teach them what behavior is acceptable and reinforce or deter behaviors. They actually reduce anxiety as there is less ambiguity about what to do and what the consequences are. It can help to make their world a bit more predictable. They can also lead to a reduction in aggressive behavior. A consequence is the result or effect of something. It's the what happens after. Consequences can be considered good, bad, or neutral, although different people may consider the same consequence differently. Consequences can impact on the likelihood of a behavior or an act happening again. For example, a bad consequence would make it less likely that we would do the same thing again. An example of this is if you went to pick up a mug and it was boiling hot and burned your hand, you most likely wouldn't go to pick it up again straight away with your bare hand. Rather, you might wait until it cools down a bit. So the bad consequence, which was your hand being burnt, made you choose not to engage in the same behavior again. Similarly, if a good consequence happens, it may make you more likely to engage in the same behavior again. It's important to think about and try to work out what consequences occur as a result of your child's behavior. As if a child gets a desired consequence as a result of a behavior, this could reinforce that behavior and make it more likely that they will do it again. So I'd like you to take a few minutes to think about what happens after your child becomes angry or anxious. For example, does it make you angry or anxious? Do they get more attention from you? Do they get to avoid something they don't like a school or a task? Jot down what comes to mind.
Providing positive attention is a strategy based on consequences. It is a way of reinforcing desired behaviors, so making them more likely to happen. This will hopefully also lead to a reduction in undesired behaviors. Firstly, you need to identify what behaviors you would like to see your child do more often. For example, in terms of an angry child, it might be to see them sit and play calmly with siblings without getting into a fight. When identifying the behaviors, avoid focusing on ones that are difficult to manage. When you have identified what behaviors you would like to see more of, the next thing is to try to catch your child doing them. Give attention and praise to your child when they carry out the positive behavior. For example, John, I noticed that you were playing nicely with your sisters. I like to see that. Good job, buddy. Kids thrive on praise, and so we shouldn't only be interacting with them to correct misbehavior. You can now pause the recording to type the link to the video into your browser, which will bring you to a video which will provide you with more information about positive attention.
We are now going to go through a few useful tips and hints to help with setting rules and boundaries. When setting rules and boundaries, it is important to use respectful language. Involve your children in setting the rules and consequences. They will be much more buy-in to the rules and acceptance of the consequences if children have been involved in setting them. Ensure that your children understand the consequences ahead of time. Let them know what will happen when they break the rules. Be specific if you can. For example, if you don't pick up the toys when I first ask you, I will give you a reminder. If you don't do it the second time, I will remind you of the consequence. If you don't do it then, the consequence will happen and those toys will be put away for 2 days and you won't be able to play with them. This way, your child can make an informed decision about their behaviour. The consequences that are set need to be related to the behaviour and proportional, so there shouldn't be a really big and serious consequence for a small rule break. If they aren't, children will perceive them as unfair and may be less likely to comply. As we learnt in the last recording, feeling like things are unfair or unjust can actually lead to us feeling angry. Consistency with consequences is massively important. You need to follow through with the consequences each time the rule is broken. If the consequence only happens some of the time, this can be confusing for children. If there are two parents involved in the child's life, it may be important to have a conversation around consistency of consequences. Ideally, both parents would follow the same. Otherwise, this could lead to situations whereby one parent is labelled as the bad cop, or the child may act up for one parent. In terms of rules, boundaries, and consequences, it's important to note that we have just had a bit of a whirlwind tour, and there is a lot more that could be said about these. Similar to rules and boundaries, routines or schedules can give a sense of predictability and security, whilst also helping to build self-discipline. Life is rarely simple. Things change on a daily basis, and we are frequently being thrown curveballs and have to face challenging situations. For your child, this could be being called upon to give an answer in class, or it could be having to navigate relationships with their peers. Children like us handle change best if it is expected and occurs in the context of a familiar routine. A predictable routine allows children to feel safe and to develop a sense of mastery. They know what comes next. They get fair warnings about transitions and no one feels bossed around. This safety is important. Remember that we have learned that when our brain perceives itself to be in danger, this may lead us to flip our lid or to move into the red zone if we don't use a strategy to help regulate ourselves. Unpredictable changes understandably can erode this sense of safety and mastery, and of course, these unpredictable changes can't always be avoided. But that's why we offer children a predictable routine as a foundation in their lives, so they can rise to the occasion and handle big change when they need to. If we know that our child is going to face a big change or difficult situation, it can be helpful to prepare both them and ourselves. After all, knowledge is power. Give your child as much knowledge as is appropriate about the situation. This will help it seem more familiar and reduce the unknown for them. As we mentioned earlier, the unknown and unexpected can seem scary for a child. For example, if your child was highly anxious at the idea of visiting the dentist for the first time, it could be useful to talk them through the process from start to finish. So from checking in at reception, waiting their turn, sitting in the dentist chair, to the dentist examining their mouth. You could use a video, social story, visual pictures, or even get your child to use their imagination to do this. It might also be an idea to give something a trial run by getting used to the environment that the situation occurs in. This may be why often schools invite incoming junior infants in for an hour or two before the school term actually starts. It's to get them used to the new surrounding and routine before adding all the other stressors, such as bigger children and so on. Another idea would be to plan in advance with your child what strategies they could use to help keep themselves regulated when in difficult situations and practice using them. For example, taking some deep breaths, Structure and routine also teach children how to constructively manage themselves and their environments. For example, children who come from chaotic homes where belongings are never put away might not learn that life can run more smoothly with a bit of organisation. Children who don't develop basic self care strategies, from grooming to food, might find it hard to take care of themselves as young adults. However, it is about balance too. Although routines can be helpful, it is important that children can still be somewhat flexible. As we said earlier, life always throws us curveballs, and if our child is very fixed and rigid with routines, then they may become very dysregulated or upset if routines are interrupted or prevented. We may need to introduce changes very slowly, with as much forewarning as possible, and to model to children how to handle things when routines get interrupted. Working on general lifestyle things can help improve both your child's mental and physical health. Try to encourage your child to increase their physical activity. Much research has found exercise to be related to better physical and mental health. For example, improved confidence, mood, emotional stability, self control, and even memory. This could be anything from walking, running, skipping, swimming, cycling, team sports, and so on. It could also be incorporated into chores for older children, like walking the dog, hoovering, or washing the car. Something is better than nothing, so try to find something that they enjoy. Work on establishing a good sleep routine. After all, not getting enough sleep can leave us lethargic, irritable, and cranky, meaning that even something small might set us off. Getting enough sleep can also help to improve our concentration and memory. Try to get your child to eat a healthy and balanced diet, and try to reduce the amount of stimulants they ingest, particularly in the evening times. Stimulants can leave children wired or full of energy, which might not be the best thing if you are trying to get them to settle down for the evening. Children can also experience crashes when the sugar or caffeine leaves their system, leaving them feel lethargic, moody, or even agitated. Where appropriate, use meaningful rewards or incentives to encourage good behaviour. For example, you could give out tokens for good behaviour, and once your child has saved a certain amount of tokens, they could exchange these for meaningful rewards, such as an enjoyable activity or item.
I'd like to invite you to pause the recording momentarily and type the link provided in the slide into your browser, which will bring you to a short video which further explains why practicing can help with emotional regulation. So, if we link what we have just seen back to the hand model of the brain, when our emotions have escalated and we have flipped our lids, our downstairs animal brain has taken over, and our upstairs brain, the thinking part, is no longer able to communicate with the downstairs brain. This is why we would find it so hard to process the situation, to pick a strategy to use while considering the consequences of the strategy, and to implement it, all the while ignoring our animal brain instincts or impulses. We need a mental shortcut, and practice establishes that shortcut.
So some of the key points that we hope that you take home today are: understanding the zones of regulation can be helpful for children to better understand their emotions and when to start using emotion regulation strategies to prevent an outburst. Emotional education is the first step towards emotional regulation. By being able to identify and communicate our emotions, we can then choose strategies and seek supports to manage them. Children are great imitators, and so parental modelling is a great way to teach children how to regulate their emotions. Finally, rules, boundaries, and consequences help children to understand what behaviour is acceptable and can give their world structure and predictability.
So the plan for the next recording is to work on building an emotion regulation toolbox. We are going to discuss a wide range of strategies, including relaxation ones, sensory ones, thinking ones, and other strategies. We will look at why they work and which ones are used best in certain situations. We will go through each of them in the recording and will point you in the direction of a wide range of resources to help you to implement these strategies.
Thanks for listening to our emotion regulation recording number 4. And remember, children are great imitators, so give them something great to imitate.